The first task of the iConnection API that we're looking at is the BroadCast task. This task will relay a message to all the connections currently connected. Here's an example. Here we have the task onReceivedAsync being performed, and what we are doing is we're returning a connection, and we're saying to BroadCast the details of this connection, or the object value, saying connection for the connection ID sent whatever data. We have used this so far in all of our examples of SignalR, and it's a very common task to use when you want to send a message out to the entire connected web application. The next task we'll be looking at is the send task of the iConnection API. This task sends a value to the specified signal, or that is, the connection ID that is being passed to it. Here's an example. Here we have the task onReceivedAsync that is getting values such as request, connection ID, and data being passed to it. And here we're returning a connection.send specifying the connection ID along with the object value following it. What this allows is that we are sending a message directly back to the connection that sent the request in this particular case. So this comes in handy if you don't want to broadcast everything to everybody who is connected to your current web application. So let's look into Visual Studio and see how you do this. So go ahead and open up Visual Studio again and open up myendpoint.cs out of your solution. What we're going to add now is for the iConnection API to do with the task send, and what we're going to do is show how instead of doing like a broadcast, we can specifically send a message to the person that it originated from. So go ahead in your onReceivedAsync, go ahead and put a few lines there, and we'll go ahead and comment out the return connection broadcast. And what we're going to write is return connection send, and we're going to specify the connection ID because that's who we want to send it back to, and we're going to say span and give it a style. We'll do a color green just so you can see this clearly, and we're going to say connection ID sent, and then the data finally. Oops. And don't forget to close our span tag, otherwise everything will be green. Okay, so there we go. And for sake of argument, I'm just going to write send message to originator of data. There. Go ahead and hit Control F5 and we'll see this in action. So persistent. Okay, after we copy that, let's go and open up our other browsers like Google Chrome and Internet Explorer, and we will paste in our URL. Now one thing that you'll notice right away is that the connections came up, but if I do a test, notice that it's now staying within the confines of wherever that test got sent from, or that message got sent from. So here we are able to directly interact with a single user or single connection over SignalR without broadcasting to everybody of what's going on. So this will allow us to do some highly interactive data on the individual level, and do broadcast level too if you need to within the same tasks. Obviously you just need to specify based on whatever you're trying to do. So this has been an example of how to use the task send under the iConnection API. The next thing we're going to look at is group management. This allows connections to be put into groups so that messages can be sent to particular groups. For example, Here we have a user with the client side making a request to the server. Server churns it, hands it back to the client side. Then we have another user also doing the same thing, interacting with the server. And then we have a third person also interacting with the server. Now, by default, everybody's in the same group, if you will, or not assigned a group at all. So if I send a broadcast message out, it's going to go to all three users here. However, let's say the two users on the right belong to the group East, and the user on the left side belongs to the group West. Now, if I use this code where we have our task on received async, and I specify that I want to send it to a particular group, say I only want to send it to the group East, well, I can do that so that the guy that is in the West group will not receive that. And you do that by using the groups.send opposed to just normally connection.send. So here you can see how we can send messages to a particular set of people without affecting the other people that may have connections to the web application. So let's look into Visual Studio and see how this is done. So back in Visual Studio now, go ahead and open up myendpoint.cs, and once you're in that file, let's go ahead and highlight all of our methods that we currently wrote, and we will just comment them out because we're going to write some new ones to deal with the groups. And the first one we want to write is protected override task on connected async, and let the IntelliSense fill it up. Again, like usual, remove the base, and we'll go type in groups.add. We'll go add in the connection ID, and the group name we'll just say my group. Okay, so that's that method. The next one we'll go write is protected override task on received async, and again we're going to remove the base, and here we're actually going to write ahead of it. So your standard message when you're dealing with groups looks like this. So it's going to be group message. That's your standard way the data is coming across. So we need to break that up. So we're going to do a string segment. Say decoded equals data.split, and we're going to split on the colon, and actually that's a character, so make sure you use single quotes. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is string group name equals decoded in the first index of the indexer, and then you guessed what this is coming next, string message equals decoded 1. Okay, now we can return groups.send, so we can send a group in particular message, group name, and then send it along with the message, and that's all great. Okay, we got one more method to write, and that is protected override task on disconnected async. Again, remove the base, and this one's going to be groups dot remove connection ID and my group. Okay, and that's what we have to do for the backend now to deal with groups for my group here. And let's go into Solution Explorer and go to our persistent connection API view. Go ahead and open that up. Okay. One thing that we have to do is we have to tell our front end basically about this group. So the way we do that is when we pass the message across, we have to have the group name as part of that. So under the broadcast.click function, let's do var group equals my group. This is because SignalR doesn't really keep track of the groups, so they're not persisted in the backend, so you kind of have to write that part yourself to keep track of the groups and basically attach them to any messages going back and forth so that can be split out easily. So here we say var group equals my group, and then we just go put it on the front end of the message. Oh, and don't forget your colon after your group name, so it can decode that on the back end. So that's all we need to do on the front end. Go ahead and hit save and Control F5, and here we go. Persistent connection, test, there it is. And if you're curious on how that's really working, we can go back here. We can put in some breakpoints and just hit F5 this time to put it in debug mode so we can see what's going on. So here we go. So the first one it hits is our unconnected async, and what's doing is doing a return for the connection ID of mine, and it's adding me actually in the back end to my group and then passing it back to the front. So that's just establishing the connection. Next we're actually passing data. So here it's coming through and it's looking at, this is the way the data comes through, my group colon test. It broke out my group and it has the value of test for the message or the data coming across. So that's what it does. Okay. And last but not least would be the disconnect, which with one window we're not going to see that. So let me go ahead and open up a second one here in Google Chrome. Okay. And we already know, so we're going to allow it to go through. So Google Chrome will send its own test. So now we see a test from both. And let me go ahead and close Google Chrome. So here's the on disconnect. It's going to remove the other connection from my group. Okay. There we go. If I do this. And now this is the on exit. It's removing myself from the group of my group. So great. There we go. So it closed everything out, and that is a high level of how you use groups in SignalR. The next item we're going to look at under a persistent connection is broadcasting over a hub from outside of a persistent connection. What this pretty much means is that you will be able to notify all clients connected when something happens on the server. Some things might be like if you're running a background task that turns out a lot of code, for instance, like if you're sorting through millions of rows and then you want to notify everybody when that's done to view data or what have you, this would be how you do that. So like I said, it allows notifications to all the clients when something happens. It uses iConnection to specify a persistent connection. Here's some code that we would have a class called notifier that has a method called notify, which does nothing more than pass a message through, and you can see that it's gathering the context by using the global host.connectionmanager.getConnection context of my endpoint. My endpoint is the other class that we had made that is our wrapper for our persistent connection. So it's getting the context of our persistent connection there, and then it's saying context.connection.broadcast the message. So here we are broadcasting our message to everybody that is connected to the site. So another option that you can do besides broadcasting to everybody, you can actually broadcast specific connections or groups of connections. So let's look into Visual Studio and see how this is done. Okay, back in Visual Studio, go ahead and open up myendpoint.cs. The first thing that we want to do is we'll just go ahead and comment out our group code that we did, and Control E, C, and then we'll go uncomment all of our original code, which does messages to everybody. Control E and U for undo. Okay, and also we're going to put it back to broadcast for everybody. Okay, So that's my endpoint.cs. The next thing we're going to do is go to our con folder, and we're going to create a new class. So add class, and we're going to call this class myNotifier.cs, and we're going to say using signal R. Then the next thing that we're going to do underneath class is going to be write a couple methods here. So first one I'm going to write is public void notify, and we'll go pass in a string for a message. And here we're going to say var context equals global host. My equal sign here. Global host dot connection manager dot get connection context. We're going to pass in my endpoint. Next we're going to say context dot connection dot broadcast message, and that's it for the notify. Next we're going to say public void group notify, just in case we have a group, and we're going to say string group and string message. And then here we're also going to say get var context equals global host dot connection manager dot get connection context, my endpoint as before. And this could be slightly different. Context dot groups dot send, because we're specifying the group, and group, and then the message being passed, and there we go. So those are our two outside persistent connection methods that we can call to actually talk to SignalR and broadcast messages on our behalf. Okay, so we save that, and we've done our endpoint here that we needed. We also need to go back into persistent connection API. If you have the group specified, you can comment that out, because we're not going to need that in this case, and we'll take out the appending of the group, or the prepending rather, right there. So go ahead and save that. The next thing that we have to do is hop into our controller and go to our home controller, and what we need to do up top is we need to say we're using SignalR, and we're also going to say using sr.con, so we can get that here. So now we want to say my notifier. We'll say message equals new my notifier, and here we go, say message dot notify, and we're just going to pass the message, and say, we'll say be someone accessed the front page. Okay, so now anytime somebody hits the front page on our site, we should get this notification broadcasted out to everybody. So save, and we're going to hit Control F5, open up our Firefox here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up Google Chrome and Internet Explorer as well. So I'm going to copy the same URL over there, and I'm going to go ahead and go to persistent connection, and here we go. So now what you can see is even if I refresh this page, you can tell that this is live, because you can even see my uppercase of someone access this front page. So that's a way that you can communicate over SignalR without even really being within SignalR, and you can run some back-end processes to push out your messages and data across your web application without actually having to be on there. So just for the sake of argument, I'm going to go back in and So this has been an example of how to broadcast outside the persistent connection through Signal R.